And we are live. Everybody, welcome to Junkyard Theory, episode 13, and Happy New Year, first of all. It's, 2020 was, well, we all know what 2020 was, but we managed to do 12 sessions, and we are back here in 2021 with episode number 13, and we're going to continue this for the rest of the year. So tonight's guest is somebody very esteemed in the industry, and he is an Academy Award nominee. He's worked on films such as the Black Stallion, Jumanji, the original Jumanji, Captain America The First Avenger, and also Jurassic Park 3. Everybody please join me in welcoming Mr. Robert Dalva. Robert, good morning to you, and thank you for joining.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Likewise.
It's very early in the morning in California. So.
I'm so sorry to wake you up.
No problem. No problem. The sun is just beginning to come up. The sky is getting bright. So.
In a month or two, I guess you guys are gonna have longer days and shorter nights.
It's beginning to get we just just beginning to become aware of it, the change. So.
How's the pandemic been affecting you guys over there?
Sorry,
you're from Northern California, somewhere around San Francisco, yeah? The Bay Area?
Yes, I live in the Bay Area. It's affected us in the sense that we're both in our late 70s, my wife and I, and so we don't go to any retail stores. We don't travel. We haven't seen our grandchildren since February of last year, other than on Zoom and various platforms. So it's affected us, but we both my wife is an artist, and I'm cutting a film, so we both have things to do. And we've stayed occupied, and it's been such a weird time. We are very entertained by the news and what's been going on. So, but it's a big change, and but things are trying to progress. There was a baseball season. I'm a big baseball fan, and so
that's awesome. I mean, halfway around the world, we are being entertained by the news from over there as well, occasionally.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Robert, could you, tell me a little bit about, how you got into film editing? Like, what were your roots? How did you get into the business?
I was a student. I went to college in a small university in upstate New York, and we had in American universities fraternities, and I joined a fraternity that controlled the college movie program, and the senior who was running it, I was a freshman, didn't care a hoot about it. So by the end of my freshman year, I was running it and booking films. The film would show Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And so I started my film education. I started bringing films to the campus. At that point, they were bringing Doris Day and Rock Hudson movies, very frivolous, kind of not very good movies, popular movies, I guess, and light movies. And I started bringing, Fellini and Aventura, French movies, and American movies. And I, by the middle of my sophomore year, the program had become profitable. People would stop me on campus and say, "What are you showing this week?" So I got interested in film in high school. I saw a film by Truffaut called 400 Blows. And near the end of the college program, I took a course in a college, Syracuse University, which is about 30 miles away. I took a filmmaking course. And my then to become wife happened to be in Syracuse too. So that made it us able to get together. And so I applied to USC Film School and got in, and they had the way they taught the school was you had to learn all 5 parts of filmmaking: writing, camera, directing, sound, and editing. And they all had the weakest professor was the directing professor. The writing guy was a Hollywood writer. The sound guys were professional sound people in LA. The cameraman was a very good professional cameraman. And the editor was had cut features. So we had a very good program, and I like to think that, Walter Murch went there. Sound design, the person who coined the phrase sound design, and a large part of his getting into sound came from the USC Film School. And then when I got out of school, the first job I got was to work on there's something called in the United States, the USIA. It's essentially a propaganda program. They make the films are never shown in the United States. And we got a film. I was working with Verna Fields, who was the editor of Jaws, but at that point she was still trying to get into the industry as a woman.
This was back in the 60s, I'm assuming.
Sorry? 68,
okay.
67, 68, close to 68, 67, 68. And she was cutting this film that was, and what happened is that the dignitary would come to the United States, and the USIA would make a film about his trip to the United States. President Marcos came to Washington. President Marcos of the Philippines came to the United States to meet with President Johnson. President Johnson wanted to justify the Vietnam involvement that the United States was in, so they decided to have the Manila Conference. Johnson wanted to hand the film physically to to Marcos. So what became a 6-week cutting schedule for a 20-minute 2-reel film became a 2-week cutting schedule. Verna turned to me. I was her assistant, and we had been working about a week. And she said, "Can you cut?" And I said, "Yes." And she handed me half the film and was kind enough to give me a screen credit. And I was an assistant for half for 1 week in my life. So, now I had a credit. I could go peddle myself as an editor. So,
and you were part of what people later coined the Dirty Dozen. You, George Lucas, Walter Murch.
Yeah, that's it. At USC, we Walter Murch, George Lucas, Randall Kleiser, Caleb Deschanel, the father of the 2 Deschanel sisters, as well as being a great cameraman and director. Matthew Robbins wrote a bunch of films. Hal Barwood.
Hal Barwood, yeah.
now John Milius, who wrote Apocalypse Now.
And you had Howard. I
John
can't remember.
Bailey, huh?
Howard. Howard.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know how to say his name either.
Yeah, I don't.
I know who he is. Yeah. And Gary Kurtz, who was a little behind, went earlier than we did, became George Lucas's producer. So there was a real connection to a bunch of us who all came. 3 out of the group of 10 or 12, whatever it was, were from California. The rest were from the East Coast mostly. And we all sort of showed up at the same time. And it was very fun, and we worked on each other's films, and it was a nifty moment. So.
And you worked with George on the original Star Wars, but not as an editor.
No.
Could you tell us a little bit,
Yeah, it was I knew George. I knew he was doing Star Wars. I didn't know much about it, and about 5 or 6 weeks before the film was going to open, he called me up and he said, "Hey, could you go shoot this?" These 2 shots I need kind of pressed. We got to get them done. We've been trying to get the shot, but we've been unsuccessful. And what they were it's when Luke Skywalker is in a land speeder.
Yeah.
Hold on a sec.
Okay. Yes, there we go.
My little model that actually George gave me a few years ago. So the land speeder, this one has wheels. The land speeder in the film is floating off the surface of the ground. The land speeder, the land speeder that we shot was a souped up golf cart, and 3 wheels like this one. This has 3 wheels, and so the trick was to cover up the wheels, and so what was used was a mirror, and I could see the 3 other attempts at this, so I had that advantage, and so what I had them do was extend the mirror under the car. This was like right there, and I had them extend it past the back and past the front. So there wasn't a line of the edge of the car, so you'd notice, because the line was, there was always a line, but it was it's further out of the car and further behind, so you didn't notice it. Then I noticed that the way they had the mirror, it was at, I can't see, there you go. It was tipped so that it was getting the ground here. And what I had them do was tip it up more, so it was seeing the ground a little further out. So it was going a little slower. It's right, if it's like here, it's going very fast. Like it's here, it's going a little slower. And it looked more like, to me, to my eye, that it was you were looking underneath the car into the distance. And then we did a take, and there were two guys who were in charge of keeping the car running and clean, and they came out with cloths to clean the mirrors. And I said, no, don't clean the mirrors. Because there was dust on it, and so we got the two shots going in two different directions. We were in a dry lake, and in Southern California, and we got the shot. The oddest thing was Joe Johnston was 23 when Star Wars was happening, and he was working. He was the guy who came from ILM to help out, and neither of us realized. And I've cut 5 of Joe Johnston's films. Neither of us realized it till Captain America.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy how certain connections can, start off like way back in the past and then play out so weirdly in the future.
Yeah.
And you worked on 5 movies with him, and I think was Captain America like the most recent one? Was it the last one?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's the last film I worked with him on.
And before that, you worked on Jurassic Park 3.
Jurassic Park 3, Hidalgo, October Sky, and Jumanji. Jumanji was the first Jumanji with Robin Williams. And then October Sky is an excellent movie. Recommended. It did not have a big box office, but it's probably the best movie I've ever cut. It's just a really good movie about a kid in West Virginia, which is essentially a coal mining state. This is in the 50s. It's when the Russians set off Sputnik, which was the first satellite, and it empowers this high school kid to start developing rockets. And the original book it was based on was called Rocket Boys. So it's really a good movie. So
yeah,
put it on your list.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I already have it on my list. I'm just yet to get around and watch it.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the Black Stallion. This was the movie that you got nominated for an Academy Award as well. Yeah. So could you walk us through how did that happen, and what was it like getting nominated?
I had 1 or 2 contacts with Carol Ballard, who lived in LA he was is a great cameraman himself, and he was one of the 3 or 4 Americans who stood by the Eclair CM3 camera, which is very much like the Aeroflex, handheld Aeroflex camera, although it was great because it had a much bigger viewfinder views. The Aeroflex, you were looking at a little tiny picture, and the Eclair, you're looking at a picture that fills your eye, of a monitor, not a monitor, a viewfinder. And so I had questions, and we talked a couple of times, and then out of the blue, I got a call from the producer. They needed an editor, so they were cutting in Northern California, where I was living, and so that's how it started. And it was an arduous process. Carol, about a quarter of the film was after the shipwreck. 3/4 of the footage was the ship and the shipwreck, and I mean not after the shipwreck, but the island. So, and the bulk of that was so 1 million feet of film. It's 90 feet a minute.
A million feet.
1 million feet of film.
Oh, wow.
It's 90 feet a minute. You can figure out how many hours it was. I used to remember, but I can't anymore. And you know, nine. So so, and 3/4 of it was the island. It had many, many, many scenes that were never in the movie. One night, I was still working, and I decided we needed to have a end credit sequence for the crew and the so I went through all the scenes that weren't in the movie and cherry picked footage out and cut together this moment that's at the end of the movie. And I had the great experience. The first time we screened the film was in Seattle. We were doing a preview where to get audience reaction, and it was a full house in Seattle. And the movie ended, and you could see the audience beginning to get up, and then the titles came on, and everybody sat down and watched the credits. So it was a very fun reaction. So it was when they shot the island stuff where the boy is. They shot for 2 or 3 months, and every day they'd go out and say, what are we going to shoot today? So there were scenes that they shot. There's a scene in the movie where Alec is trying to get the horse. He's trying to feed the horse with some seaweed, and the horse that they tried. There were probably 15 days that they tried to get this to happen, and it happened once. He actually took it once, and that's what's in the movie. And it was great fun, and lots of good stories. Carol tells great stories about it. There's a scene where Alec wakes up and there's a cobra right next to him, and the Carol had met with the greatest, the best animal trainer in Italy. It was mainly an Italian crew, and mainly the island was all shot in Sicily, and so they made a deal, and the man said, "Well, okay, we'll have 2 cobras. They'll be matched, and we'll take their venom sacs out of them, and but they will not survive, and it'll cost you $2,000 each." And okay, that seemed, and so they got the cobras, and Carol forgot about it. This was weeks and weeks before they were going to be shooting it. They had not started shooting there, and so the day that they're starting to shoot the cobras, 2 guys who's never seen before show up, and they're the cobra handlers. And Carol says, "Well, have they been the venom sacs removed?" No, don't worry about that. It's okay. These 2 Italian macho guys, and they said, and Carol said, "Well, what about if someone gets bit?" Or one of the things that cobras do is they spit venom, and it can get into your eyes. If it gets in your eyes, it's just as effective a poison as being bit, as being struck by it. So and they do this. So they said, "Oh, no problem." They pulled out a little container, and it was indeed a syringe and a little tiny bottle. And they said, "We have anti-venom they have to go to the hospital. They'll just be sick for 2 weeks. No problem. And so what they ended up doing was they put up and if you look at the movie, you can actually see the density difference. They put up a piece of plexiglass in front of Alec. The Cobra was on the other side of it. The problem with that is it's a piece of plexiglass is like a mirror. So they had to darken everything that they didn't want you to see. So the camera had to have a big black hood over everything. And it took time to do that. Everything slowed down. And it took so long to get one shot that they were now into what had been a day shoot had become 3, 4, 5 days. And it was getting colder because it was in September. And cobras are cold-blooded.
Cold-blooded, yeah.
You put them on cold sand, and guess what? They don't move. So then they had to dig pits, put space heaters under them, put plywood on top, put sand on top, and then they would put the cobra on the warm thing, and then perk up and do their cobra thing. But it took 2 weeks to shoot these shots, and the cobras died anyway, and so it was a terrible producer's decision.
That's why they say try to refrain from working with animals and kids.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Old people. They say old people. So.
Old people too. So you edited the first Black Stallion movie, but you directed the second one.
Exactly. That was a simple. We were working at that point. Near the end, we were working in San Francisco, in the city of San Francisco. A lot of the cutting was done in Marin County, actually, at George Lucas's home. There was an extra building in it, and we used that. I actually cut in the basement of his house, and we moved to the city to work at Zoetrope, American Zoetrope, Francis's company, because Black Stallion was an American Zoetrope film, Francis Coppola's company. And one day I had been using his, Francis is a very innovative filmmaker. And this was now in 1977. And he had developed an offline video editing system that used VHS tapes, and I was trying to restructure the island sequence, and I had been up there in his cutting room in his office, and I had finished, and I was coming down and walking out the door, and Francis pulled up in a taxi cab and got out, and he said, "Robert, if there's a sequel to Black Stallion, do you want to direct it?" And I said, "Sure, Francis." And that was the deal. That was how I got to direct the movie. So we shot a little bit in Italy, but we mostly shot in Morocco. It was a long shoot because most of the film was outside. We were shooting in the winter, so we only had 9 or 10 hours of daylight. And
how did moving into directing from an editor's standpoint? How did that help? Like, how did editing basically help with the directing, if at all, in a way?
I believe that there's a great quote by Stanley Kubrick that. Two quotes. One is basically, he says, photography existed before film, directing existed before film, writing existed before film, but editing is unique to film. And Verna Fields called it cutting. I think it's a better term. The French call it coupe, right? And I think it's a better term because there's always, I think people who don't understand what editing is, there's confusion between editing a book and editing a film, and they're entirely different because the structure, every film you edit, the only film that I ever cut that stayed exactly in terms of scenes like the script was Jumanji, but Jumanji had dice rolls, and the scenes had to stay in that order. So Paul Hirsch, who you've interviewed, says editing is the final rewrite. So editing is really isn't shooting, getting everything you need to make the movie in the editing room. The same with pre-production. It's all to get this footage that you put together in the cutting room. So as I said about USC, all of us who went there, we all had a great editing teacher, and I think of all the filmmakers who came out of SC, the one thing you can say about all their films is they're really well cut, because we all understand editing. It's always a surprise to me how many people in the film industry do not understand what goes on in a cutting room, and so okay, cut to me directing this movie.
Yes.
So I understood coverage. I understood what I needed to get, and knew that as the day progressed and I was running out of time, I couldn't get this shot. Well, I could lose that shot, but I've got to get this shot. This angle, this. So that helped me. But the thing that didn't help me was, because I had been nominated for an Oscar, the Italian crew, which is very different from an American crew in that it's very hierarchical. The regista, the director, is God, and you're kind of put up on a pedestal, and so you're a little bit unapproachable to begin with, but they were all afraid to make, like one of the great, you have a great collaboration with a cameraman, and because the director is setting the shot. The director is always setting the shot, but what you're getting from the cameraman is his or her experience and help with angles and the designs of shots. I got none of that. I had to think of everything, which was fine. But I missed the collaboration because it is a collaborative medium,
Always, yeah.
So, and you need all the help you can get, as a director.
100%. Yes, I mean, it's been no different. At least making short films, and collaboration, I believe, is key. So I can only imagine what you went through on a set like that. Yeah. But at the same time, you've been editing for quite a long time, and you've edited on a tape and non-linear. You've seen the whole film versus film transitioning into the digital phase as well. What are your thoughts on this process, like this transition?
Well, for me, it was economic. I had been directing commercials in the United States, TV commercials, and I had just I was living in Northern California, but I was working at a Los Angeles company, and I decided I enough was enough. I didn't want to do it, and for years I had done commercials through Coppola's company, American Zoetrope, and I was waiting for my car at the valet parking at the San Francisco airport when I met a local filmmaker, John Cordy, who's well known in the Bay Area. He's made a bunch of independent films and predated Zoetrope and George and Phil Kaufman and all these people working in the Bay Area. And he was standing there waiting for his car, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in cutting a movie?" So I cut it was a TV movie of the week. And then after that, a few weeks later, I got the call for Black Stallion. And so basically, I moved away from directing and shooting. I still, all through from the beginning of my cutting career, I still was a DP. In fact, in Black Stallion, the first time Alec rides the horse, from when he comes out of the water and rides on the beach, that's all stuff that I photographed. There's a bunch of stuff in the final race that I was one of the cameramen on. I was the DP on a TV show, Nash Bridges. For 4 years, I shot almost all of the second unit stunt stuff. So, I stayed active in all these things as much as I could. But I love cutting. I love the nature of it. I love the involvement. It's to me, it's engrossing, and it's this giant puzzle that you're trying to figure out and make work.
And which do you prefer, actually? I mean, you did say the change was more economic, but do you miss cutting on tape at all?
Cutting on tape? No, I never cut on tape.
Okay.
From the first time at USC Film School, I teach editing at a small school here in San Francisco, and one of the sessions I do is what it used to be like cutting film. When you make a cut in the late 50s, early 60s, it was done with glue, and you would lose frames from your work print. So I was trying to remember the last film. The sun is up now, and the last film I think was Hidalgo was shot on film. Some of Captain America was shot on film. And what occurred was nonlinear editing began to take over, and so you would transfer the film, the film footage, the work print, to videotape, and the Avid system figured out a way to make 30 frames work like the real 24 frames. It would find a way to eliminate the frames that the video was making, so you were working on a video system, but you were seeing only the 24 frames that were the footage. Cutting on tape I have done it. I've worked in tape because when you were doing TV commercials, you had to at some point go to tape, and it's just a terrible process, and it never was a good method until some of the machines got better. And nonlinear editing is using computers and not videotape. Although that's in the early days, that's how the images got to the computer. through videotape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the key points that you keep in mind whenever you are editing any specific scene?
Say again?
What are the key points or the elements that you keep in mind whenever you edit any
Well,
scene?
I think editing is about finding the rhythms of the scene, and the rhythms. I can remember years ago I was watching dailies, which is something that's disappeared, and I recommend to any filmmaker before they start cutting, look at all your footage, and dailies happened. The film would be shot. It would go to a lab. It would be processed. The negative would be processed, the camera negative. Then that would be printed. Then the print and the separate sound would come to the editing room. The assistant editors would sync up the picture and sound. And then usually at the end of the shooting day, the editor and the director and whoever of the crew wanted to go see we'd all sit in a room and watch the dailies. And I realized at one point that I was tapping my foot while I was watching a scene. And I realized that what I was actually doing was that I was realizing that the scene I was looking at had a rhythm, had a beat to it. And so I started trying to find that in everything that I was looking at. And it taught me a lot about the rhythm. So the rhythms come from movement, like just how I'm doing my gestures, and they're from the rhythm of your voice, the rhythms of the lines, and then the camera, how the camera moves, on and on and on. There are all these things playing out the rhythms. So that's something that I actors. The way actors deliver the lines, and then editing is also about cutting. Is about emphasis. A reaction shot is telling the audience how to interpret what they're seeing, how the character is feeling, and that sometimes is more important than seeing the actor who's delivering the line, because you're showing the emotion. So it's about dealing with, film is about emotion. That's what it does best. That's what it reveals best. You can use it to teach something, how to put something together, but it's only okay at that. But what it really does best is about emotion. And so the rhythms, finding the rhythms of the pace of something is one of the ways that help you with storytelling. And that's finally what you're doing. That's you're telling a story. And it moves in time, has a beginning and a middle and an end. And so.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
And this is something Paul Hirsch said when I interviewed him last. He said that there's a time when you become snowblind. He used the term snowblind because you've seen the footage, you've seen the edits so many times, and then you're unable to judge how it is. How do you deal with this?
It's the big battle is keeping your intuition and keeping it alive. It's hard because you're working in minutia. You're finding the cut. When I was cutting film, I would not physically put the first cut together. I would mark where the cut would be and where the sound would be, and so I would have numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4A. That and then I would write down what the order was, and I would hand that all to my assistant, and then he or she would put it together, and then I would look at it, and so nobody had ever seen it before until I looked at it, and so that was a good way. So I don't make rough cuts. I don't make assemblies. I try to cut the stuff at the beginning. So sometimes a little slower getting a cut done, first cut done. I don't call it rough cut. I call it a first cut. And but you battle it. There's you move away from something and say, I think it's working. I'll go on to this next scene, and then a couple of days later you'll go back and look at that, and there'll be a certain degree of freshness. The other way is showing it to friends as a short film filmmaker, or screening it with an audience. Yeah, it's a great equalizer, because you're for the first time you're in a room as film was designed to be, full of people in a dark room, watching shadows on the screen, and you get the chance to see how an audience reacts. I have a real fear that COVID is going to change the way we watch movies. It's going to, it's a good chance that a bunch of movie theaters, at least in the United States, won't be reopening because of the economics of it. The theater business, the movie theater business, is not a very profitable business. It's barely profitable. Selling popcorn and candy is one of the ways that a movie theater breaks even. So, So anyway, those kinds of things are really important, and I think experience is also the great blessing that your generation has is that you see so much film every day, so much, video, whatever you want to call it, on your phone, on your computer, on your television, so that we are all better. Everybody in the world sees better than they saw 40 years ago. When I cut
to more content, like it's bombarded at us every single day from social media to
exactly. I mean, when I cut Black Stallion, the negative cutter, you have the camera negative, right? That becomes what becomes the film, but somebody has to cut the pieces together. There are numbers on the edge of the work print, and that match numbers on the camera negative. There's a negative cutter who puts those pieces together using the work print as the guide. And the first negative cutter I had, whose named happened to be Betty Davis, who is a famous actress and in America and the world. Yeah. And she said, well, do you want to know how many cuts are in Black Stallion? And I said, oh, I hadn't thought about that. I said, yes. And she says, 980. Oh, okay. That's good to know. So from that point on, I asked how many cuts were in the final movie, although it's now harder to find that out because the negative cutter would know, because all the little pieces would be hanging there for him or her to put into the cut. I asked, I got the number on Jurassic Park 3, which is half an hour shorter than Black Stallion, 980 cuts. Jurassic Park 3 has more than 2,000 cuts. Oh, I said, gee, that's interesting. And it doesn't, when you look at it, there's lots of cuts in it, but it doesn't ever seem to too cutty, too, and so it brought me to the concept that we learn everything we watch teaches us how to see what things that we watch, and we get everything we see, we get better at. And we're all good watchers of film. So,
do you think? I mean, does that go to say that editing as an art form has changed throughout the years, that it's evolved, or have we evolved?
I think it's the same process. It's just that the tools are different, and editing is editing. The school I teach at, the course I teach is called advanced editing, and the first words out of my mouth to my students are, "There is no such thing as advanced editing. There's just editing." And
editing.
Yeah, editing is editing. So, as Kubrick said, it's unique to film, and it is how a film is finished, how the film is made, and so what's changed is in the past since October Sky, Jumanji, all the films I've cut have had CG in them. There isn't a film I've cut since Jumanji, which was essentially the first film I cut, that didn't have CG in it. So there is that, what we used to call opticals, which in the simplest form is a dissolve. And the way that was made was it went to a specific machine called an optical printer, and the dissolve was made. The shutter was closed on one side, the film was rolled back, and the other shot coming in, the shutter was open, and that would make the dissolve. And it was a new piece of film made from the camera negative. That's become part of computer generated. So some of the things like a dissolve can be done in the nonlinear machine. But the point is that there are certain new things that you can do to manipulate the film, but essentially a cut is a cut. And cutting why you cut and where you cut, and I think editing is very instinctive. Walter Murch and I have talked about this a lot. What makes you cut? I don't know. I don't think it's one thing. I think it's how you respond and how you see. And we all. I like to believe we all see very well, and the audience that you're cutting for understands seeing as well as you do. You just know how to manipulate it as an editor.
Yeah.
So
you're basically like a mentalist. You manipulate.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. What you're trying to do as an editor is to stay a little bit ahead of your audience, so that your audience, through the unfolding of what you're doing, becomes engrossed in what you're doing and stops thinking and is feeling, and they're intently watching. They're concentrating on what you've done, and they get inside the movie. There was a movie theater here that no longer exists in a small town close to where I live, and it was a very narrow theater, and down at the end of the theater was a screen, and it was kind of small. And the thing that I learned from that theater was there was a point you go in and you sit in the lights haven't gone down, and you look down and there's this little tiny screen at the end of the theater, and it wasn't really tiny, but it was small looking, but at some point in the movie, suddenly that screen has come big, and you are inside the screen. And it's it's brain stuff, but it's because you pulled into the movie, and that's, I think, a good deal of what the overview of what you're trying to do with an audience is, that you're trying to not deceive them, but involve them and invoke these images so that their brain isn't trying to figure things out, and as soon as that happens, you're out of the movie.
True.
And so if a shot is too long, that takes you out of the movie, and that's or there's a bad cut, or the sound distracts you, or these are all things that you're manipulating, and
it's about getting them all plugged in for us. Long runs.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the CG. I mean, as an editor, like let's take a movie like Jumanji, and this was back in this was in 1995, and CG takes such a long time to be rendered and everything. And how does this affect the editing process?
What happened with CG for me is it's gotten in terms of professionally. Most of the work I've done CG has been ILM, Lucas's company, not anymore, and it's now Disney's company. And there's a shot in Jumanji where the lion leaps down from the third floor down to where Robin Williams is standing and the kids are. And that shot was the first shot we handed over to ILM. So there was no lion. There was just a background plate with the movement in it. And this is 1995. And this was the first shot we gave to them. It was the last shot we approved, and we approved it grudgingly. We had no more time, and the term is could be better, CBB, but you accept it, and had anything of the lion back then took, when we wanted to render it to see what it was looking like, most of the time when we looked at the animation, the lion didn't have its mane, because it took an enormous amount of time to do the hair. And so they would start Friday night at 6 o'clock rendering it, and the rendering wouldn't be done till Monday morning. So this is now 6 months to get a final on one shot. In Hidalgo, there's a scene that we added scenes. I found a shot of a horse, and we found reaction shots, and some we shot, some were put on backgrounds. And there's a dust storm, and there's one shot where the horse comes out and he shakes his head. That's a CG shot with the background plate. And one of the hardest things to do is smoke and dust. So this is now, I don't know, 2000 something, 5, 7, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the date. Overnight, we had the shot, the composite, and it looked great. We said, "My God, that's a final." And the effects supervisor said, "Oh no, we're not done with it. It just wanted to get it to you." So that's the thing that's changed, is that the ability to put out CG stuff is enormously fast, and the innovation is just miraculous. There's shots in Jurassic Park 3 where the raptors are a puppet anatraumatic, and then they turn, and in that turn, they are taken over by ILM and become a running away raptor, and so it's to me remarkable. And the simplest, the low budget movies have CG shots in them. I did a shot about baseball, and they're in a film about baseball that has baseball in it, and there's a scene where they're at a stadium, and a minor league stadium, and in the background, written on the walls, are Coors, the beer, the American beer, and Coors was asked, "Is that okay?" And they said, "Well, is there any alcoholism in the film you're working on?" And we said, "Yes." And they said, "No, we'd like you to take. You can't use the name Coors." So this extremely low budget film had to find the money to CG out the signs. So this was, nowadays I could do it on my computer. So it plays a role, but it's become an easier tool to manipulate, and I think that almost every film, every theatrical film has some CG in it that you're not aware of. Something is fixed. Oh, there's a microphone in the shot. Let's erase it. And yeah, when you did wire stunts before CG, you did everything you could to make the wire invisible. So it was by lighting, taking the light off it, putting light on it, whatever. And nowadays, it's gone.
It's very simple now.
Yeah. So it's a great tool. It solves lots of problems, but it doesn't make. You still have to cut the movie together, and it's just a tool as much as anything.
And I have two questions before we kind of wrap up, because we approach the 1 hour mark, but it's all good. Working with multiple editors versus working alone, how does that dynamic play out? What are the advantages of working with somebody, and if there are any disadvantages, what are they?
Basically, the one movie that I really worked. There were other editors on Black Stallion, but they didn't last. It's a long, dull story. The film that I worked with another editor in conjunction with, and was Jeff Ford on Captain America, and what we did was we didn't do one scene and then he did the next scene. What we did was we found blocks of sequences. So I cut the beginning, and then he cut the first time we see Captain America before he's Captain America. I shot the transformation through the chase where he's, gets the submarine guy. So we were cutting, 6, 8, 10-minute sections, 6 to 8, I'd say, sections that were in a sense a sequence rather than a scene. And,
Gotcha.
When I teach about sequences because they're connected and they flow into each other, and they have distinct. They belong together. So that was basically how we cut
Captain Captain America.
Yeah. Captain
Didn't,
America.
didn't styles clash at all?
Excuse me?
Didn't your styles clash? Or, and I mean, like,
Oddly enough, we would look at each other's stuff before we showed them to Joe and the producers, and we would comment. You know, we would kind of aid each other and make suggestions, see things. You know, so it was a different set of eyes, and it was very healthy, and we. You know, that's something. You know, we would sort of meet in the morning. He'd be there at 6 in the morning, and I would be there at 9:30. So I would come into his cutting room, and we would have a chat, sometimes about nothing to do with the film, and sometimes a lot to do with the film. And then we would work, and you know, the next day we would do the same thing. And then every once in a while, he'd say, "Look at this," and I'd say, "Come in and look at this." You know, so it was a real collaboration, and then Joe Johnston connected it because he was looking at both things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Yeah.
Final question for tonight. For people wanting to get into filmmaking, basically editing or directing, whatever it is, what's the advice that you would give youngsters?
I don't know. I've been asked that question 100,000 times.
Which is why I'm asking
Yeah,
it.
yeah. You know, it's a passion. You know, find a way to make films. The great difference between when I was starting and now is that one of the most expensive parts of it is no longer expensive. The camera's expensive, but shooting is not shooting. Getting it onto some media is cheap now. It's just the cost of a hard drive or the cost of a SSD drive, and so and you can learn a lot from short films, you know. So, but in terms of the crafts, I think it's looking for jobs and you know, being persistent, calling everybody up, and you know, finding the phone book in Northern California. There's a book called The Real Directory, and it has it lists basically all the people who are in the film business. I recommend to people to get a copy of that and call every producer up, every person who calls themselves a producer or production manager, and at some point somebody's going to need somebody, and you'll be the classic right person in the right place at the right time, and so you know, and it'd be a low level job. It's not going to be you know, a set decorator. It's going to be getting coffee or you know, getting essentials. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Robert, thank you so much for
Sure.
It's getting you on board was quite a process. We've been conferring since last year, but we finally managed to make it happen, and possibly someday in the near future we could for round 2. Thank you so much again, and people, next time we are going to have somebody who's a storyboard artist, and he's designed concepts and storyboards for what once was the biggest television series at one point. So winter is coming, and I'll see you guys.
Storyboards are help in the editing room too.
Do you want to
Yeah,
how?
I always like to have them if they're available. And Joe Johnston, one of the things he did was he was one of the storyboard artists on Star Wars, and he's a great artist. And he actually, I think, has peddled some of his storyboards online. But anyway, yes. So storyboards, if there are storyboards, be sure you get a copy in the cutting room. They're help. That's how you want to put it together. So at least you have a starting point. Finding the first shot of a scene is the key to how you cut a scene. What is the first shot? And it might not be what the director intended, or it might be exactly what the director intended. So
it's about finding whichever one works best and serves the story.
Yeah, exactly. That gets you into the scene and triggers what you need to know at the beginning of the scene. So
I wish I had asked the storyboard. I didn't have a storyboard question, but now I wish I had brought it, because I've never used storyboards when it comes to the editing, because by that time it's all shot and we work around with whatever, what the footage that we already have. But might as well try it out, using storyboards for editing.
I always ask, and I'll when a scene comes to me, if there are storyboards, I definitely look at them. But the other thing I do is I go back to the script and read the script before I look at the dailies, and then look at the dailies. And then A, I know what changed if something changed, and B, I have an idea of what the scene is. So these are tools that you have available to you, and if there's a tool, use it.
Definitely. Awesome. Thank you so much for the insight, Robert. And I really feel like we need a session too for a few more things to discuss. But let's get on it.
If you want to go on, I'm happy to go on. So,
you know what? I think we got 3 minutes more. Let's just do
all
it.
Right. Okay.
Okay, you mentioned storyboards, but and also the script. How often has the script, influenced the final edit? Because like Paul Hirsch said, this is the final rewrite, the edit.
Well, the sad thing is for the writer is I have to say, one of the things that is done on the set is there's a script supervisor, and what he or she is doing is marking the takes on the line down the thing, and there's this large book that has all the information from shooting that sits next to you when you're cutting, and you use it, and you once in a while refer to it, but the fact is, the one thing I don't look at very much after shooting, other than looking at it right when I'm about to cut a scene, a new scene, is the script, because the script no longer matters. What matters is what's on the film, and so it's kind of too bad, but the work has been done. It was the guide for the shooting. It got what you have as an editor to work with, but once you have it as an editor, the rules are off. You can as I said earlier, you move scenes around. You try this scene in front of that scene. You read. There's a film I cut for Haskell Wexler. He's a DP. He shot this one scene 3 different times, and it's a scene in a car, and that allowed me to completely restructure the scene. What was the written end of the scene became the beginning of the scene. The middle kind of stayed the same, and what was the beginning of the scene became the end of the scene. and it was a much better structure, and the scene was much better by this manipulation. So, you drop lines, you realize that, that's been said before. So you're always doing stuff that happens to be related to the script, but because it's on the film, that's what's important. That's all you have to work with is what's on the film. So the script got you there, but it's not in the cutting room. It's not a big influence.
How does the structure, how is it influenced when it's a non-linear film?
Say again?
How is the structure, influenced when it's a non-linear film, when the story is non-linear?
I think that how time functions in a movie is one of the unique things about it. So, flashbacks, flash forwards, compressing time, lengthening time, montages. These are all time manipulation things, and I think that's part of the how you build the rhythms of the whole movie and how you structure it. So I think it's more. Those are your that's kind of some of the magic of editing. There's a film called Cleo from 5 to 7, directed by French director Agnes Varda. I cut one of her films, and the first film I cut was her film, and Cleo from 5 to 7 takes place from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock in Paris. And there are scenes where Cleo walks from point A to point B, and in the movie, they are exactly that length. So, and yes, kind of took film time and made it real time, and it kind of works. There's parts of the film that, why are we watching shoe leather? Someone walking. But it's still, it's a very conceptual, avant-garde test of film in a way. So, what's it? 1917 kind of plays with that idea, but there's cuts in it. It's not that the cuts in it, but that there's a big chunk of time where he falls and gets knocked out, and so we don't have to watch him sleeping for 14 hours, so or 4 hours, so time in movie is time in movies is really one of the unique parts about it, where how you do it. In Bourne Adventure, the assassin is getting ready to go shoot Bourne in the railroad station, and he's putting the gun together, something that packing the gun or whatever, something that would take 2 minutes to do, but it's 12 seconds in the movie, and yet you believe that you're seeing the whole operation, because you're seeing it in pieces. That's something that film does really, really well. And
what something that we tried with one of our short films was editing it to a certain tempo, because we were doing this scene where you have this, it's a fight sequence, and we wanted it to be choreographed to some music, but we didn't have the music track. What we instead did was we cut it to a certain BPM. Have you ever done something like this, or has?
No, I'll tell you two quick things. There was a director when I was at USC. I was a film director. Gore. No, I'm going to say his name wrong. Shoot, it'll come to me. He started as a silent filmmaker, and he told us in class that the silent films, as a director, you would go through the script and you would find the beats for the scene using a metronome The metronome goes
exactly. Yeah.
something musicians use, and that would be on the set while you were shooting the scene. And so silent movies started having sound in them, and you couldn't do that. So what he did was he would have the metronome going during rehearsals to give something a beat for the scene to be in the minds of the actors, and you know, it's a very interesting idea. The other thing is cutting to music. Don't do it. Cut the scene. Find the beats, the rhythms that are in the action. What's remarkable, one of the things that, you know, in movies, the second to last thing that is done about the same time that the sound editors and sound designers come in, the music is handed over to the composer. You kind of lock the picture. And so the music is composed to the picture, not the other way around. And you use temp music nowadays because composers' music is all available, you know, on CDs. You use their music as temp music. But what I do, and I think most editors do, is you cut the scene, and then either the director finds it or you find it, and you say, you know, this music is the right feeling, and you pop it into the scene and figure out where it should start. And what's remarkable is if the cutting is good, the cutting has its rhythms, how many beats and hits you get from the music because the cutting is right. And I had a great compliment from James Newton Howard. He says, I love writing music to your stuff because the rhythms are there. You know, I can pick up the rhythms and use them in the music.
So good edit feeds into the music and vice versa.
You know, you end up making a cut to a beat, but maybe it's not the right place to cut. And the fact that it's on a beat maybe makes the cut seem better, but cutting it on the beat of the picture makes the music work. So the picture should be driving the music, and a good composer transforms something, adds something to it because of what's on the picture, what he or she is seeing in the picture. So I say, you know, it's no longer true, but in the early days of MTV, I would recommend to people to turn off the music, turn off the sound, and watch the cutting. And the cutting was dreadful. It looked, oh my God, you couldn't believe it because it was cut to the music, and you once you lost the beat of the music, the film had no rhythm to it. You know, not always, but it was remarkable to me when you turn the sound down. How
do you recommend like a metronome, like using a metronome to maybe you know, mark the rhythm, I guess? Would that
I certainly don't, and I don't think anyone in the film industry did. But the director's name, I can't remember, King Vidor, that was his name, King Vidor. He did, and I think it's because it isn't, you know, it didn't become part of the methodology of making films. But I think that you as a director have senses of how you want the scene to move, and you know, it's very legitimate to say, you know, let's do it faster, you know, or you know, asking, you know, you have great skilled actors, and they can do things with their voices and with so it's very legitimate to talk about pacing to an actor. When I cut Hidalgo, Viggo Mortensen's great actor, who's great sense of timing, would make it difficult sometimes because he would build pauses into his dialogue
Right.
So I would have, the editor would have a reaction shot. But in most cases, you have a reaction shot if the guy's not talking, if the actor's not talking. So, so it caught on to all the other actors, and I termed it pausitis, as if it was a disease. But it just what it removed was staying on one person, talk, reaction, talk. You lost the possibility of that because the pauses were elongated. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool, Robert. Thank you so much, and
Sure.
that last bit was just really insightful. So, guys, I hope you guys got something out. This was like a treasure trove. So, till next time, don't forget to stay in touch with Junkyard Theory. Thank you so much, Robert. Have a good one.
Stay safe.
You too.
Yeah.